One plastic cup. 45 seconds. The end of everything. November 19th, 2004. The Palace of Auburn Hills. A routine blowout game between bitter rivals suddenly becomes the most violent incident in sports history. Ron Artest charges into the stands. Fists fly. Fans attack players. Chairs get thrown. Millions watch in horror as the line between athlete and spectator gets erased in blood and chaos. The aftermath? Over $100 million in lost earnings, 9 players suspended, 5 fans criminally charged, careers destroyed, championship dreams shattered. The NBA forever changed. But here's what they won't tell you about that night. This wasn't just about one man's temper. This wasn't just a fight that got out of hand. Forces had been building toward this explosion for months. And the real story? It's way darker than what you saw on TV. The bad blood started 7 months earlier, June 2004. Eastern Conference Finals. The Indiana Pacers, best record in the NBA, 61 wins, stacked with talent and hungry for a championship. Their legendary shooter Reggie Miller in his twilight years, desperate for that one ring before retirement, Jermaine O'Neal playing like an MVP candidate, and Ron Artest, the league's best defender, evolving into an offensive threat. They were unstoppable. Then they ran into their former coach. Larry Brown had taken over the Detroit Pistons and turned them into defensive monsters. Ben Wallace anchored the paint. Rasheed Wallace brought attitude and skill, and they had something to prove. Game after game, the series got more physical, more personal, more brutal. Then came the moment that changed everything. Game 2. Reggie Miller drives for a layup that could force overtime. Out of nowhere, a young Pistons player named Tayshaun Prince flies across the court and blocks the shot into oblivion. One of the greatest defensive plays in playoff history. The Pacers never recovered. Detroit took control of the series. And in Game 6, with elimination looming, Ron Artest snapped. He delivered a vicious smack to Rip Hamilton's face, right on his protective mask. The Pistons fed off that energy. Indiana's stars went cold. The best team in basketball went home in 6 games. Then Detroit shocked the world by beating the Lakers' super team in the finals. The championship the Pacers thought was theirs? Gone. And they had to watch Detroit celebrate. But here's what most people don't know. That wasn't Artest's first violent outburst that season. Earlier in the year, he destroyed a courtside TV camera at Madison Square Garden after a bad call. The league fined him $15,000. Commissioner David Stern was already watching him, already building a file, and rumors started circulating among players. Some Pacers felt the refs had favored Detroit in that conference finals. Calls didn't go their way. Physical play was allowed on one end, but not the other. Years later, one of those refs, Tim Donaghy, would be exposed for fixing games. Was that series rigged? We'll come back to that, because 7 months later, when these teams met again, old wounds hadn't healed, and the NBA was about to pay the price. November 19th, 2004. The Pacers rolled into Detroit on a mission. 7 wins, 2 losses to start the season. They looked even better than the year before. Jermaine O'Neal was dominating. Reggie Miller, despite a broken hand earlier in the season, was ready to contribute. And Ron Artest, he wasn't just playing defense anymore. Through the first 9 games, he was playing like a legitimate MVP candidate, scoring efficiently, distributing, carrying the offense. This was a different player, a complete player, and the Pacers had added a crucial piece over the summer. Stephen Jackson. After Al Harrington demanded a trade for more playing time, Indiana swapped him to Atlanta and got Jackson in return. Most people didn't notice. It wasn't a splashy move in an offseason where Shaq got traded to Miami and Steve Nash joined Phoenix. But Jackson was exactly what they needed, a tough, skilled wing who could score and defend. A guy who'd won a championship with the Spurs and wasn't afraid of big moments. With Reggie aging, Jackson stepped up as that third scoring option. The rich got richer. The Pacers were legitimate title favorites again. And tonight was their statement game. National TV, defending champions, chance to send a message. They dominated from the opening tip. Ben Wallace and the Pistons had no answers. By the 4th quarter, it was a blowout. Pacers up 15-20 points. Game over, garbage time. Starters should have been on the bench, but they weren't. And that's where things get interesting. Ben Wallace had been talking trash to Ron Artest all night. Footage that surfaced later, mic'd up audio, revealed threats, personal insults. Wallace was heated about something. Some claim his brother was sitting courtside, also shouting at Artest. Tensions were high despite the lopsided score. Then with 45 seconds left, Artest committed a hard foul on Wallace during a layup attempt. Was it intentional or just competitive basketball in a rivalry game? Depends who you ask. But Ben Wallace didn't wait for an explanation. He turned around and two hands shoved Artest in the neck and face. Hard. The kind of shove that starts brawls. Benches cleared. Players rushed in from everywhere. Chaos erupted. But here's what nobody talks about. The refs that night. Ron Garretson, Tommy Nunez, and Tim Donaghy. Yeah, that Tim Donaghy. The one who later admitted to fixing NBA games from 2003 to 2007 for gambling purposes. He was working this game. Was this game compromised? Were the refs letting things get out of hand on purpose? Why were starters still playing in a blowout with under a minute left? These questions never got answered, because what happened next buried everything else. After Wallace's shove, something unexpected occurred. Ron Artest walked away. He didn't retaliate, didn't throw a punch. He walked over to the scorer's table and laid down, just reclined like he was at a beach, put his hands behind his head, closed his eyes. Some people say Artest was genuinely trying to defuse the situation by removing himself from the confrontation. Others claim he was taunting the crowd, that he knew exactly what he was doing, that the lying down was disrespectful, provocative. We'll never know his true intention, but what we do know is this: the Detroit crowd was going absolutely insane. Cups of beer, popcorn, ice, debris, all raining down on players near the bench. The Pacers were trying to leave. Game was essentially over. Then John Green, a fan sitting in the lower bowl, made a decision that would change basketball forever. He picked up his full cup of Diet Coke, reared back, and threw it as hard as he could. It sailed through the air in a perfect arc and hit Ron Artest directly in the chest. For 2.3 seconds, Artest stayed on that table. You can see it in the footage. He processes what just happened, looks down at the liquid on his jersey, then his face changes, and all hell breaks loose. What happened next has been replayed a million times. Artest explodes off the scorer's table and charges into the stands. But here's the part people forget. He attacked the wrong fan. John Green threw the cup, but Artest went after Michael Ryan, an innocent guy who was sitting near Green. Ryan got punched, tackled, beaten by Artest before anyone could stop it. Then Stephen Jackson saw his teammate in the stands and didn't hesitate. He jumped the barrier and followed Artest up into the seats. Jackson was throwing haymakers at anyone in reach. Fans, security, didn't matter. Then Jermaine O'Neal sprinted toward the melee. A fan ran onto the court trying to fight players. O'Neal wound up and threw one of the most devastating punches you'll ever see. If O'Neal hadn't slipped slightly on the floor, that punch could have ended someone's life. As it was, the fan crumpled like he'd been hit by a truck. But it wasn't just 3 players. At least 9 Pacers either went into the stands or fought fans on the court. Anthony Johnson got a full beer thrown directly in his face and retaliated. David Harrison was throwing punches. Fred Jones was in the mix. Complete chaos. And the fans. They weren't innocent victims. Multiple fans rushed onto the court with intent to fight. They were throwing chairs, metal objects, full cups of beer and soda. One guy threw a plastic chair that nearly hit Jermaine O'Neal in the head. Security was completely overwhelmed. It took over 20 minutes to clear the arena and get the Pacers safely into the tunnel. But here's what the broadcast didn't show you. While this was happening, Pacers players' families, wives and children were trapped in the tunnel area fearing for their safety. The crowd was so out of control that security couldn't guarantee safe passage out of the building. And there's another disturbing detail that never made headlines. Multiple reports claim some Pistons players were laughing during the brawl, allegedly encouraging the crowd, enjoying watching their rivals get attacked. Ben Wallace, the guy who started everything with that shove, was held back by teammates and never entered the stands, but the damage was done. In 45 seconds, everything changed. Careers were about to be destroyed. The NBA was about to come down with punishments so severe they'd shock the sports world. And the real fallout? That hadn't even begun. David Stern had a decision to make. The NBA commissioner had been trying to clean up the league's image for years, and now he had the perfect excuse to drop the hammer. 3 days after Malice at the Palace, Stern announced the suspensions. Ron Artest, 86 games. The entire rest of the regular season plus playoffs. Over $5 million in lost salary. Stephen Jackson, 30 games. $1.7 million gone. Jermaine O'Neal initially got 15 games, later reduced to 25 after appeal. He lost his All-Star selection. In total, 9 players suspended for a combined 146 games, the longest collective punishment in NBA history. The Pacers, championship favorites, were gutted. They went from a 60-win pace to barely making the playoffs. First-round exit, Reggie Miller's last realistic chance at a ring, gone. He'd retire in 2005 without the championship he'd chased his entire career, and Ron Artest's reputation never recovered. Despite being one of the league's best two-way players, he became a pariah. Traded to Sacramento within 2 years, bounced around the league, changed his name to Meta World Peace trying to rehab his image, won a championship with the Lakers in 2010. But he never escaped the shadow of that night. He was forever the guy who charged into the stands, the face of the brawl. Stephen Jackson's career took a similar hit. Despite being a productive player for years, he was always viewed as volatile, dangerous, the guy who threw punches at fans. Jermaine O'Neal, who was on track for a Hall of Fame career, never reached those heights again. Injuries played a role, but the suspension derailed his momentum. He went from MVP candidate to just another good player. But here's what people forget. Ben Wallace, the guy who started everything with that two-hand shove to Artest's face, only got 6 games. 6. While Artest lost an entire season, Wallace was back in 2 weeks. The disparity in punishment raised questions. Was Stern making an example? Was this about the brawl or about something else? And then there were the fans. 5 fans were criminally charged. John Green, the guy who threw the cup that started it all, got 30 days in jail, 2 years probation, and a lifetime ban from the Palace. 4 other fans got probation and bans. But in the court of public opinion, the fans were victims. The players were thugs, animals, out of control. Ron Artest received death threats for years, had to hire extra security for his family. Meanwhile, John Green did interviews playing the victim, claiming he was just caught up in the moment, that he didn't mean for it to escalate. The consequences destroyed lives on one side, but barely touched the people who instigated the violence. And that's when things got even darker. Because Malice at the Palace wasn't just about suspensions and lost money, it was the excuse David Stern had been waiting for. Within months, the NBA implemented sweeping changes, increased security at all arenas, league-wide spending of over $50 million on new protocols, alcohol sales banned in the final minutes of games at most arenas, stricter player conduct policies, mandatory anger management programs. But the most controversial change came in October 2005, the dress code. Players were now required to wear business casual attire to and from games and during team functions. No more jerseys, no more do-rags, no more chains, no more throwback jerseys, no more baggy jeans. It was framed as professionalism, but players and fans saw it for what it was, a direct attack on hip-hop culture. Allen Iverson, the face of the NBA's street aesthetic, spoke out against it, called it racist. Others agreed. The league had been trying to distance itself from the hip-hop image for years. White suburban fans, the NBA's biggest demographic, were uncomfortable with cornrows and tattoos, and the culture players represented. Malice gave Stern the ammunition he needed, and some people believe it was intentional. There's a conspiracy theory that's gained traction over the years. What if Stern wanted an excuse to implement these changes? What if the harsh punishment of the Pacers was about sending a message that went beyond the brawl? Clean up your image or get buried. The timing was too convenient, the punishment too severe, and the cultural shift too immediate. But it worked. The NBA's image changed dramatically over the next few years. The league became more corporate, more family-friendly, more palatable to mainstream America. And the players who embodied that old culture, they were phased out or forced to adapt. Ron Artest changed his name, got therapy, became Meta World Peace, a joke to some, a redemption arc to others. Stephen Jackson, years later in a 2020 interview, stood by his actions. Quote, "We were defending ourselves. Fans think they can do anything, say anything, throw things, and we're supposed to just take it. We showed them they can't. That night showed there are consequences," end quote. But in 2024, Ben Wallace finally expressed regret, said the shove was heat of the moment, that he never imagined it would lead to what happened, that he felt partially responsible for destroying the Pacers' season and Reggie Miller's last chance at a ring. Too little, too late for most people. The damage was permanent. The scars ran deep. And the invisible barrier between players and fans, that was created in those 45 seconds. To this day, player-fan interactions are different, more distant, more cautious, because everyone remembers what happened when that line got crossed. But there's still more to this story, questions that never got answered, conspiracies that make too much sense to ignore. Let's talk about Tim Donaghy, the ref who worked that game. In 2007, just 3 years after Malice, The FBI exposed Donaghy for fixing games. He admitted to betting on games he officiated from 2003 to 2007. That includes the night of November 19, 2004. So here's the question nobody wants to ask. Was the Malice at the Palace game compromised? Think about it. Why were starters still in the game with 45 seconds left in a blowout? That's not normal. Coaches protect their players in garbage time. But Rick Carlisle kept Artest on the floor, and Ben Wallace was still out there for Detroit. Donaghy and the other refs let the game get physical. They didn't control the situation after Wallace's shove. They let players mill around for way too long. Tensions escalated because the officials did nothing. And Donaghy had motive to let chaos unfold. If he had money on the game, if the point spread was in play, keeping starters in makes sense. Letting the game get out of hand makes sense. But we'll never know the full truth. Donaghy's scandal focused on other games. The NBA buried any investigation into that night. Too much liability. Too many questions they didn't want answered. So Malice remains this unsolved mystery in some ways. What if the refs controlled the situation? What if they pulled starters earlier? What if they ejected Wallace immediately after the shove? Does the brawl still happen? Probably not. But here's the even bigger question. Who's really to blame? John Green threw the cup, but fans still defend him. Say he was drunk. Say it was just a stupid mistake. He served 30 days and went on with his life. Meanwhile, Ron Artest's life was destroyed. He lost a season, lost millions, lost his reputation for reacting to being assaulted, because that's what it was. A fan threw something at him, committed battery, and when Artest defended himself, he became the villain. The double standard is insane. Fans feel entitled to scream at players, call them names, threaten their families, throw things, and players are supposed to smile and take it. Be professionals, but the moment a player responds, they're thugs. They're animals. They're out of control. It's a power dynamic that's never been addressed, and Malice exposed it. But instead of having a real conversation about fan behavior and accountability, the NBA just punished players harder. Made it clear that no matter what happens, the customer is always right, even when the customer is throwing full cups of liquid at someone's head. And that brings us to the saddest part of this whole story. The what-ifs. The Pacers were championship caliber. Best offense, best defense, best record. They had everything. Would they have beaten the Spurs that year? Probably. Would they have beaten the Heat? Most likely. Would Reggie Miller have gotten his ring? Yes. One of the greatest shooters in NBA history would have retired with a championship. Instead, he retired with nothing. Because of 45 seconds. Because of one cup. Because of decisions made in anger that destroyed years of work. Jermaine O'Neal never reached his potential, derailed by that suspension and subsequent injuries. He's not in the Hall of Fame. He should be. Ron Artest won a ring eventually, but he's remembered for Malice first, basketball second. He'll never get into the Hall despite being one of the best defenders ever. And Stephen Jackson, despite a long, productive career, is known for throwing punches in the stands. Their legacies are tainted forever. But you know what's really messed up? Every time there's a player-fan incident now, Malice gets brought up. Russell Westbrook had popcorn dumped on his head in Philadelphia. Malice at the Palace. Kyrie Irving had a bottle thrown at him in Boston. Malice at the Palace. Ja Morant gestured at heckling fans. Malice at the Palace. The incident is used as a cautionary tale, but it's always framed as player misconduct. Never fan misconduct. Fans still feel entitled to abuse players. The only difference now is players don't respond. They've been conditioned, threatened with suspension so severe that it's not worth it. And maybe that was the point all along. Maybe David Stern didn't care about violence or safety. Maybe he cared about control, about making sure players knew their place, knew they were products, entertainments, not human beings who could be pushed too far. Because here's the uncomfortable truth that nobody wants to admit. Malice at the Palace was inevitable. You can't treat people like commodities, allow fans to abuse them without consequence, put them in high-pressure situations with refs who might be crooked, and expect everything to stay peaceful. Something was going to break. It just happened to be Ron Artest on November 19, 2004. But it could have been anyone, any player, any night, any arena. The system was broken, and instead of fixing the system, the NBA just punished the symptoms. 20 years later, not much has changed. Fans still scream horrible things at players, still throw objects occasionally, still feel entitled to treat athletes like they're not real people. And players still have to smile and take it, because if they don't, they'll lose everything like Artest did. So when you watch highlights of Malice at the Palace, when you see Ron Artest charging into the stands, When you see Steven Jackson throwing punches, when you see Jermaine O'Neal landing that devastating blow, remember this. They were reacting to being assaulted. They were defending themselves against a mob. They were human beings who got pushed past their breaking point, and they paid for it with their careers, their reputations, and their futures. While the people who threw cups and chairs and insults, they got probation and went home. One plastic cup, 45 seconds, the end of everything. But maybe it was never about the cup at all. Maybe the NBA wanted an excuse to do what it did next, to implement the dress code, to control the culture, to send a message about power and hierarchy, and malice at the palace. That was just the perfect excuse they'd been waiting for.